Trey Murphy is out for the season. I'll tell you his recovery timeline and if he'll be ready for the start of next season. But does this also mean the Pelicans need to shut down Zion and CJ for the remainder of the regular season? It's the Wednesday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Wednesday, a game day for your New Orleans Pelicans as they're taking on the Minnesota Timberwolves, but everything's kind of overshadowed right now by the news of the Trey Murphy III injury. He is out for the remainder of the regular season. I'll explain his injury to you, tell you what the recovery timeline looks like, and when we're going to see him on the court. Is he going to be ready for the start of the regular season? And given that, look, truthfully, wins, losses don't matter for New Orleans right now, should they shut everybody down at this point? I'll answer that question coming up in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today into every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. I'm sorry, I'm yawning. I'm tired. I think we're all tired of the season here. And become an everyday or listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. So let's get into it. When I had finished recording the show yesterday after the debacle of a loss to the Detroit Pistons, we did not have the exact update on Trey Murphy's injury, but it came out pretty quickly that he was going to be out for the remainder of the regular season per the Pelicans press release. And this came at 11:12 Central Time. The New Orleans Pelicans announced that Trey Murphy III has been diagnosed with a torn labrum and partial tear of the rotator cuff in his right shoulder. The injury occurred when Trey Murphy III dislocated his right shoulder during the first quarter of last night's game against the Detroit Pistons. An MRI taken tonight confirmed the injury diagnosis. Trey Murphy III will miss the remainder of the 2024-25 regular season. Further updates will be appropriately provided. So first and foremost, this sucks. Like, this truthfully just freaking sucks, y'all. He was one of the brightest spots of the season for New Orleans, really blossoming as a starter. And basically, look, being part of the reason, indirectly, why Brandon Ingram was traded to the Toronto Raptors when it came down to it. The way Trey was playing with his shot selection, too, this was someone that you looked at and was like, oh, okay, like he is a future really good player here, future starter, borderline all-star player, 21.2 points per game, shooting 36% from three, but he got off to a slow start, taking 8 attempts per game. His rebounds were up, 3.5 assists, 1.1 steal, almost 1 block per game. The numbers are just really good. Getting to the line and beyond the numbers, right? It's just the way you saw him improve strength to finish through contact at the rim, more confidence driving, more in his bag with his moves, his handle, to be able to be more than just a straight line dunker when it comes to certain things like that. He just improved all around as a player. The offseason work that he did really paid off. More on that in a second. So, talking to some injury experts around the league, particularly Jeff Stotts of InStreetClothes.com, he is an invaluable resource when it comes to this sort of thing. You know, this is a 5-month recovery. He's almost certainly going to have surgery if there is a tear of the labrum. And I'm not going to pretend to be a doctor here, but talking to people much smarter than I who are doctors, this is basically what they said. 5 months for the recovery. Jeff Stotts said in particular, it's very similar to the injury that Herb Jones had, and everyone's expecting Herb to make a full recovery and kind of be back for the start of next season. But that 5 months is where this gets a little bit interesting. in my opinion, because 5 months from, say, today is going to be, I'm recording this on March 18th, my birthday, by the way, is going to be, what is that? August 18th. Training camp basically starts right around the corner from that, more or less. It's going to start on October 1st. The team is going to do some offseason workouts and things like that. So recovery is roughly 5 months. Now, the very good news about this is surgery and recovery comes with a very high success rate, according to Jeff. Basically, you do this, you do it, you get it fixed, and you will be fine. This is not a lower leg injury or anything like that where there can be longer concerns about reoccurring injuries and things like that. So Trey will make what we're anticipating, at least right now, a full recovery in around 5 months, which in theory puts him right around the start of training camp. If there's a setback, if it's maybe worse than they thought, if the recovery drags out longer, you're getting very close to missing the start of the regular season. And Trey Murphy, by the way, has not been ready for the past 2 regular seasons. Had a meniscus injury 2 years ago, had a hamstring injury to start this year. So for him in particular, this really sucks. You just want to be fully healthy, ready to go, and playing your best basketball at the beginning of the season. And the Pelicans, who want to be a playoff team next year, let's assume they're keeping Zion Williamson, planning to build around Zion Williamson. You're already without DeJounte Murray. If Trey misses time, what does that mean? We'll look at that in the third segment of today's show. But this just sucks. So let's go back to a point I made earlier. You might be saying, well, be ready for the start of the regular season. That's fine, right? Not necessarily. Look, that's better than not. I will agree with you there. But one of the things that we saw from Trey was a significant amount of improvement during this offseason. That wasn't the training. He went down on the first day of training camp. That improvement was his own individual work this offseason. He flew to LA, I think I could say this, and worked with Drew Hanlon, who's like a renowned skills coach who works with Jason Tatum and other NBA players. And you could really see the work that Drew did and the improvement that Trey made and like finding what he needed to improve upon and putting in the work. I believe he was in Los Angeles for about a month. So he's not going to get to do that necessarily this offseason. And that's what sucks. That offseason when you're putting in the work after taking a vacation, taking some time off, spending time with family, friends, all that stuff, that's where you get real dividends. Training camp is for chemistry. It's for instituting your offense. It's less so for like individual player growth. Trey did that growth himself over the summer. The Trey Murphy you're seeing this year is really due to the work that he put in and wanting to be a better player and committing to it. Finding a guy, paying a guy, I would assume, to go, probably not cheap, to go and work with him for a month to get better, right? That is an impressive part of Trey Murphy, but is he going to be able to do as much of that this offseason? So is there going to be maybe not as much of a leap next year? If he played as he is right now, he would be fine. We love that player. He's very, very good. But the work that he put in to want to strive to be better, this is what you hope Zion wants to do, right? This is what you look for in a player. Trey should be commended for this sort of thing. And that's why I'm making a big deal about it on the show here. This is something important for y'all to know about him, in my opinion. And losing some of that just sucks, right? Like, look, you can't fault him as a freak thing. He was diving for a loose ball, off his own turnover, but whatever. Like, you fight, and he was doing that even in a lost season, and players should be commended for that sort of thing. These things just happen, and it's nobody's fault, no one to blame. It just sucks. And that's what happened here. So 5 months. Should be fully recovered, shouldn't be an issue going forward. But that offseason development time is pretty valuable, and we're hoping for an even bigger breakout Trey year next year. I think you still can see it. I'm not worried about him long-term as a player. I just hope he's ready and fully ready to go by training camp in the start of next season. And based on the timeline, you're like just sneaking that in a little bit, in my opinion. But there is some potential for it to linger a little bit. We'll look at that in the third segment of today's show. But given that this loss happened, or this injury happened in a blowout loss, a 46-point loss, it was a first minute in, so you're not expecting that. Should they be playing Zion? Should they be playing CJ? Or do they just need to shut it down? Let's answer that question coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Prize Picks. Basketball season is heating up, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. So with Prize Picks, you just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's easy to use, available in over 30 states, and lets you mix and match projections across different sports. So maybe you want to select Luka Doncic for more than 25 points, Jason Tatum for more than 8 rebounds. Prize Picks is going to make it simple. You can set your lineup in less than 60 seconds and stay engaged all game long. And when you win, your money hits your account in as little as 15 minutes, no waiting around. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is also brought to you by Hungry Root. When it comes to grocery shopping and meal planning, I've had this ongoing problem. I just don't have the time between work, multiple jobs, this and other stuff, life, and just also wanting to eat healthier. I was constantly feeling stressed out. So I'd go to the grocery store, you buy things you don't need, and then you end up with no time to actually cook, and it's all a waste. And then sticking to my health goals, that was a struggle too. But everything changed when I discovered Hungry Root. I really love this because it's just been a game changer. It's the easiest way to eat healthy without all the stress. With Hungry Root, it's like having a personal shopper and nutritionist all in one. They take care of my grocery shopping, recommend meals and groceries based on my tastes and health goals, from anti-inflammatory, high protein, what I like, and gluten-free options. And the best part, every meal is ready in 15 minutes or less. I cannot spend a long time cooking. I'm going to wolf it down in like 5 minutes. So the fewer minutes I spend cooking, the better I feel about it. 15 minutes or less. Quick, healthy meals that actually taste great, all delivered straight to my door. And it's been a huge time saver and has made me healthy. So I dig it. So you're going to love Hungry Root as much as I do. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box and a free item in every box for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA. That's hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA, to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA. Do not miss out. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. And don't forget about the Locked On Pelicans free daily newsletter, LockedOnDaily.com, to start your day with the all-new free Locked On Pelicans newsletter. Again, that's LockedOnDaily.com, where you can sign up for free. So let's get into the bigger question here. Look, sucks for Trey Murphy. By the way, I do want to mention, Ja Morant had this type of injury last year. I don't know the exact severity of it, but he had a torn labrum last year. Trey also has the rotator cuff injury. I do not know if that's what Ja Morant had, but he came back clearly fine, no further damage from it. Just go and have surgery. I'm sure we'll get an update on that somewhat in the future. That is what Trey has done, as I'm sure he's just kind of evaluating his options right now. So that's the good news there. And the bigger question then becomes, does Zion need to play at all? A little bit? What about CJ McCollum? Who on this team at this point should be shut down? There's, I believe, 14 games left to go in the Pelican season. You obviously have already been eliminated from postseason contention, right? There's 13 games left to go. What do you have to play for? Now, there are certain things we want to see from this team. You want to see some growth from players, all those sorts of things. There are things that they still have to work on. But now that Trey's out, DeJounte Murray is out, we're not going to get to see any of the lineups and figure out if those work or not. You might get Zion, Kelly Olynyk, and Yves Missi out there on the court together, but without some of the other players that are kind of key to that lineup, that data doesn't matter as much. So now, going forward over these final 13 games, I don't know if you can collect the data that you were really hoping for. You can still collect some, and that informs what you're going to do this offseason. But it's not like we're going to look at, DeJounte Murray, Trey, Zion, Olynyk and Messi and be like, oh, that lineup's real good, or it's not real good? Or could they run Zion at the 5 because they have all these other... None of that matters anymore because you can't run any of that stuff. So all of a sudden, these 13 games are less valuable to me than they were before. And so if they're not going to result in what you want, is it better to shut guys down and not risk any sort of injury, especially with the injury luck this team has had, whether it's a curse or something else? Do you want to risk Zion suffering a pretty significant near catastrophic injury, let's say, and not being ready for the start of next season? I don't. What about CJ, right? If you're trying to trade him this offseason, who knows if they are or not? What if he got hurt and isn't going to be ready for the start of next year? Is any team going to trade for him then? You know, these are the decisions the Pelicans are kind of now faced with, and these are the most important decisions around this franchise and this roster. And so as you look at these final 13 games, yeah, I think the Pelicans need to find a way to shut down CJ McCollum and Zion Williamson. Look, if Zion plays, of these 13 games, right, there's some back-to-backs remaining, so that's going to take him out of it. They have 2 back-to-backs left. So he's going to play maximum, 11 games. And he's probably going to miss 1 or 2 in there anyway. And they were maybe going to shut him down for the final week or so of the regular season. Find maybe a way to do it now. Now, look, you want Zion around the team. You don't want him away from the team or anything like that. That's kind of important. But find a way to do it and don't risk any sort of injury because they're banking on being competitive next year. They want to be competitive next year, and it's going to take a healthy and this version of Zion Williamson to do just that. And if you're not getting that, that's not great, in my opinion here. So you need to find a way to shut him down, fake an injury, whatever, and do it under the cover of basically not getting fined so that you don't need to worry about next year also being a waste in addition to this year. This year is kind of a waste. You don't want 2 years in a row to be a waste either. Look, DeJounte Murray's not going to be ready for the start of the regular season, most likely. You need to minimize the damage and figure out a way to do it. You're going to need to get another point guard. Look, if Zion goes down, is going to miss the start of the regular season, you may as well just pack it in, fire everyone in the offseason, and make different changes. No one wants the changes to come from that reason, let's say. So they need to do that, right? Any sort of long-term injury now is likely going to potentially, has a good chance of impacting the regular season. And look, maybe it's just a hamstring strain or something like that, but we've seen how long those linger for Zion Williamson. While I want him to take some time off for cover in the offseason, now I want him back in the lab working hard, being ready for next season so he doesn't need to play himself into game shape from game 1. I want him ready to go on game 1 of the regular season, not, okay, it's the start of the journey, and by mid-December, then he'll look good. Do it now. But even a hamstring injury that's going to be 6 weeks minimum is going to impact that kind of offseason for Zion. Don't want that. We just went over to CJ McCollum and trading him. So I think you need to find a way to shut those guys down. Look, it means you can play Jordan Hawkins more. And Hawkins has not played well, so he needs that. But also, this helps you tank in a variety of different ways. And that draft pick, as much as I hate rooting for losses, is important. It's the reality of the situation. At 18-51 this season, you're within striking distance for the 3rd worst record. 1 win away. 1 more lot. They have 1 fewer win. The Charlotte Hornets. 3 wins is Utah or Washington. Now they're garbage, so I don't imagine that would happen and change, but you never know. So that's something to keep in mind here. And so for the Pelicans to prioritize health in next season and help their draft pick, shut guys down. It means, look, the final 6 home games that they have are going to be no fun, like in that sense, but they haven't been fun for a minute anyway. Now, it's fun to watch Zion drop 30, put up a triple-double and a win over the Los Angeles Clippers, don't get me wrong. But that's a fleeting moment that feels good in the moment, absolutely does, but there's bigger things at stake here that the Pelicans really need to prioritize. And that's just the unfortunate truth of the way this season has gone. Look, play Play Jordan Hawkins, tons of minutes. Play Austin Reeves, tons of minutes. Misi, tons of minutes. Makovich, tons of minutes. Whoever's a young guy that you think has a chance here, maybe shut Jose down or not, depending. He'd be a tough one. He's not going to say yes to that. Look, I don't think Zion or CJ want to get shut down either, but it's in their best interest to preserve their bodies and for this team to go where they need to go. And look, if Brandon Boston Jr. can somehow come back from his stress reaction, play him a bunch too. But at a certain point, don't risk any more injuries to key long-term pieces for this franchise, because look just what happened to Trey, and that absolutely sucks. So let's say this Trey Murphy injury lingers. Don't think it should. Does that potentially impact what the team needs to do this offseason? And I think, in a sense, it does. And I'll explain what that is. And it's kind of drastic. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Robinhood Gold. With Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%, plus you also get 4% APY on your cash in non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. So the new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk, rate subject to change. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 a month for 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to Robinhood.com/boost. Over 8 times the national savings average. Account interest rate claim is based on data from the FDIC as of November 18th, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. And let me take that off here. Don't forget about our bracket breakdown on Amazon Fire TV. I'm going to play a video here for y'all.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Don't forget about Locked On Saints. Going to see Ross Jackson this weekend. Hang out with him. Locked On Saints, covering everything black and gold. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, did you see the set on that video? Did you hear how professional it sounded? I actually had that up on the Fire app, and it's awesome. I'm going to win my brackets this year. Go give it a go. You got to go check it out. It's actually really cool. Cool things only Locked On can do. Just really cool. We're going to actually do more of those kind of big event shows and things like that. Amazon apparently literally reached out to us, was like, we want Locked On to do this. That's kind of cool to me. All right, so let's talk about the potential impact on next season. Look, if Trey Murphy, maybe delays the surgery for whatever reason, that's his right to do, and looks like it might miss the start of the regular season while you also don't have DeJounte Murray ready for the start of the regular season, that is a big concern to me. Trey Murphy's in the first year of his extension next season, making $25 million per year. And now you're also not going to have DeJounte Murray ready next season. He's also on his extension, and that's kicking in. He's making $30 million next year, 29.5, let's call it 30. That's $55 million in salary that could not be, potentially. I think Trey will, but let's use this hypothetical here. Wouldn't be playing in game one. That's a disaster for New Orleans. Not anyone's fault. These are freak injuries that just happen. There's not a whole lot you can do when it comes to this sort of thing. But that sucks. And that means you're going to be worse. There's just no replacing that no matter what. So does that change the offseason plans for New Orleans? And I think it at least should. If you can't go and get a point guard and you try to get a center and upgrade that position and you can't because, look, I don't think a guy like Jared Allen's going to be on the table. Look how good the Cavaliers are this year. Why would they change that? Even if they don't win it all this season, even if they're a bit disappointing in the playoffs, they're likely going to run it back with that group at least one more year. So you need a point guard. You need to upgrade the center spot. You do. And if you can't do that, what is your actual ceiling for this team if Trey's not playing, if DeJounte Murray is not playing? We can get an idea of it going forward. You just lost by 46 to the Pistons. Basically with that group, without Trey, without Murray, you'd have Herb back in theory, but would Herb have overcome a 46-point loss by himself? No, probably not. I think this group would not be that. You're a playing team is what it would be. Maybe fully healthy with Trey or not, depending on who you add in the draft, but rookies struggle to make an impact their rookie year. So if you're not going to be that good, is it time to blow it up and rebuild? Now, you'd have some dead salary on your books in DeJounte Murray, but look, if you're going to be bad, whatever, he doesn't play, that helps you tank, helps you improve for the draft next year. And then, you have your top hopeful draft pick here. Maybe this changes if you're 7th overall or something like that in the draft. But that's kind of what you would be looking at, I think, a little bit. So overall, if Trey is going to miss some time, I think that forces the Pelicans to at least, it should, I'm not saying it will, should force them to consider a rebuild and kind of moving on from this era, whether that's just the Zion era, the Willie Green era, or the David Griffin era, or all of the above. I think that kind of impacts that and should make them seriously consider that sort of thing. Because this is not ideal, not great, and not what you want whatsoever for this team. The West is still going to be tough next year. It's tough this year. You need all hands on deck, and you need a healthy team. And if you don't have that, I mean, whatever, right? So if that's going to be the case, you need to consider going in a different direction and jump-starting a rebuild, hopefully. While Zion's value might be at his all-time high, but we talked about this literally the other day, that maybe his value isn't as good around the league, even if it's at an all-time high, because it's been so bad recently. These are all kind of the big questions you need to consider. You're going to need to answer when it comes to all of this. It's not easy, but the Trey Murphy injury should kind of factor into the decision-making here. And look, if they don't shut guys down and there's another injury, that kind of seals the deal. But, if that injury happens to Zion, happens to CJ, and we're praying it doesn't, that's the type of thing that then kills their value. And then what do you do? You're just bad with bad salary on the books and all of those problems. This is going to force some serious questions that need to be answered this offseason. We kind of have an idea of what they're going to do right now. Let's try and be competitive next year, but might not be the best move given the injuries, and maybe they just won't be in the first place. Not a fun reality to face here if you're a Pelicans fan. Let me know what you think in the comments down below on YouTube. That's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NolaJake on Twitter. I'll be back with you all tomorrow to recap the game, talk some more draft. See y'all next time.